Okay. Welcome to Purposeful Life. We're here to learn about interactions with law enforcement, and so we're going to introduce ourselves here real quick. So you can go first again.
All right. I'm Officer Yoder with the Bryan Police Department. Worked for the police department for about 9.5 years, and been working with Lucinda on this for the past few months. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and you're...
Oh yes, and also my son was diagnosed with autism last year, so this has been kind of eye-opening. Also a learning process for me, but I do hope to kind of add a little input, and hopefully there's something that you can take away that's helpful from tonight.
Okay, and I'm Lucinda Thelen. I'm a retired educator. I taught in public schools. Well, I'm not going to tell you how long, because then you'll start figuring out how old I am, and I'm kind of hiding that one. But I taught general ed, I taught driver's ed, and I also taught special ed. And special ed was the longest that I've taught, but now when I retired, they don't get into this retired stuff, so I got recruited by the Center on Disability and Development because they knew me through different things that I had done teaching. And so I'm a program aide there. One of my projects is Purposeful Life, and so that's why you see me here all the time. I have a son with autism. I won't say how old he is either, because I have to pretend I had him when I was like 10 or something, And so anyway, but he is an adult, and it's the same fears, because he does have his driver's license, and knowing what could be and interactions, and he did go to college, and we actually met with the campus police at Sam Houston so that they would understand and know and have his name flagged. So there's a lot of extra steps to go through to keep them safe. But the main one that we're going to look at is how to prepare them. How do you prepare your child? Whether they're an adult or not, there's still ways we can work on preparing them. So I should have, before I clicked over to this, why would your child or adult family member even have to interact with police? What are some of the reasons? I've got the cheat thing up there if you want to read it off of the board.
They get lost.
Yeah, if they get lost.
My biggest fear is that my son will get into a car accident, and it could be just something really minor, but he will not talk. And I'm afraid that that's going to be misconstrued as disrespectful or resisting or anything like that.
And we're going to talk about that, yes. Yes, ma'am.
My son is particularly, one of those stereotypical, what someone would call trouble teen in terms of his behaviors, and it's not helped by his autism. And it may not all be that, but my concern is that he doesn't know how to stop arguing and be aggressive with police officers, and I've seen it firsthand several times, and I'm really worried the bigger he gets, the older he gets, someone's going to really hurt him. Not necessarily police officers, just anyone.
Right.
Just not understand this very mouthy young man who's like 6-something.
No, I know, my son was aggressive. We have a hole in a wall in his high school he had to pay for doing. He was very aggressive, and he's not short. You can see I'm not short, but he's tall and big, and that was the biggest thing, and we worked on that. That was a huge focus because I could just see what would end up happening. So, but just think how many different ways we interact with law enforcement. I mean, it could be, yes, someone gets hurt, they're lost, they need to call 911. Okay, that's a whole lesson in itself. When I taught special ed, we worked on that for weeks about what to do and helped them come up with a safety list and all this kind of stuff. And yes, they do get in trouble if they call it and they're not supposed to. So we worked on that as well. Car accident, but they're also going to see them in the community, not just things that happen. They're going to see them in the community. They're going to see them in their schools with the school resource officers at different events. And then, unfortunately, if they are in trouble, breaking the law, hitting someone, hurting someone, yes, law enforcement is going to be there. Can you think of any other times meeting them? I think we kind of...
Yeah, so regarding the school resource officers, we have an officer at all the Bryan ISD high schools, and then occasionally they rotate as a rover through different schools. They'll touch on the elementary schools. So we do get a lot of interaction with the kids. Those SROs are really the staple in the school system. So the kids start to know who they are, they recognize their face. And so a lot of times if we have a child who maybe has a little trouble, we might call on the SRO because they've already kind of established that rapport. So that's kind of a good step that we can take. And then at events, as part of the neighborhood enforcement team, we try to make as many events as we can in the city of Bryan. We're involved in First Friday. We get tons of kids that just come up to us and want to talk and chat, and that's kind of what we're here for, is to be that liaison with the community. And then especially during things like Community Helper Week, which happens in October, we're kind of dispatched out to these different locations, and we're just showing off our cars and our uniform and just talking to these kids to help them be comfortable. And so we're here to talk to them and to help them have a positive perception of law enforcement as they grow up.
Okay, and this is the part that, it's the most important. You've got to prepare them for possible interactions, both on the phone, or in person. The younger you start, the better, but don't worry, there's always learning if they're not young. And this is really important. And that's the part that we need to focus on here. There aren't special rules for individuals with disabilities. When it comes to interacting with a police officer, everyone is expected to obey the law. Everyone. All right, I'm going to share my little story. Is that okay? For example, in another school district where I taught, I had a young man with autism. So again, it's an invisible disability. All right, you're not going to see him and go, oh yeah, there's something there. It was after the, I'm not going to remember which school shooting. It was one of the colleges, and it had on the news that the person that did the shooting and injured people did it because he was bullied. Okay, he said that was his reason for going in and doing this. All right, so when you have somebody with autism who takes things literally, he processed that, I'm being bullied. That means I need to get a gun and shoot people because that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, he was 14 at the time, 14. So where do you think he went to try to get a gun? He went to the school hallway and saw a group of African American males hanging out together, and he walked up to them and said, excuse me, I know from on TV that you have to be in a gang because you're standing all together. And he said, so if you're in a gang, I need you to get me a gun so I can shoot the people who are bullying me. All right, so these young men who were not in a gang were freaking out, to say the least, ran and grabbed a teacher. He said the same thing to the teacher, got him to the principal's office, said the same thing to the principal's office. And so what do you think happened?
The police were called.
Police were called and he was arrested. He was arrested. He was getting a gun to try to kill people. It didn't matter that he was autistic. Okay? Yes, did he come back to school? You bet. He had a one-on-one with them all the time. Did he have to go through the juvenile system? You bet he did. And his parents were like, but he doesn't understand. But it doesn't matter. Look at what law he broke. Look at what he did. And so the next 5 years that I had him, because he stayed an extra year in school, I mean, that's stuff that we worked on, and we called it test of evidence. You don't just hear something and think it's true. You have to find things that back it up. So we did the teaching for that, but yeah, that really happened. Okay? It can happen, and that's why it's really crucial that we get things so that they understand that the consequences are real.
And I will say that there's sometimes we've come across situations where there is some discretion to when we're going to actually file those charges, when we're going to pursue that. And we, use some common sense. Let's evaluate their mental culpability of where they're at. And so we try to do our best. I've come across a couple of scenes where there was a domestic disturbance, but both of the people had a mental disability, and it's like, well, is this the best thing for them right now? You know, is it the best thing for them to go to jail? And so, in extreme cases like that, yes, you know, there's going to be times where we have to take action. But there are also times where we have the discretion to say, well, let's see if we get a parent, a caregiver over here, release that person, and then follow up. And then, you know, in the courts also as well, we'll have to evaluate mental culpability. So there's two sides to that one.
Yeah. Well, knowing him and how literal he was,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like going, oh man, this is not okay. All right, so how do you prepare? We've already said a scary time, we've done this, we've got people that know and they're worried with all of this. And so this is a list of different things that we're going to talk about now. So basically, you've got to know with the age and what their ability level is, that's going to determine what type of things you're working on. How does your child learn or communicate? Okay, if they're not verbal or they have different issues with verbal, that's a whole nother issue. And so how do you get them ready? So we're going to talk about visual aids and social stories, working on their self-advocacy skills, which has cards, living out loud and what you can do to help against that, fight against the law, which I'll show you that, and that's what the youth are covering now, role-playing and scripting, and then community engagement, and then developing a safety plan. So that's what this next part is going through all of this, okay? All right.
Was this the handout?
It's on the
Okay.
slide thing. So, and the first one that we're seeing is a social story.
So some things you can do with your child, obviously age appropriate, what is their skill level, sit down and just start to identify things about a police officer. You know, if you have a young child, hey, you see an officer, they're wearing a specific uniform, they're identifiable, they have a badge, handcuffs, a gun. You can open up a conversation about gun safety. You know, what do you do if you see a gun? Can you tell somebody? Should we touch the gun? You know, just those kind of thought games. And then obviously, if they're older kids, you can get into a little bit more detail with them. Canine, obviously, you know, any kid is going to want to pet a dog, my kids included. So, but canines are there to work, and so they're not to be petted. And that's maybe something you want to open a discussion with your kids and say, well, you know, this is a working dog, and we shouldn't touch that dog, and unless it's, you know, the officer says it's okay. And then obviously the radio, taser. You're talking about weapons. You could even talk about, well, why do officers have weapons? When is an instance when they might use them? And you can go as detailed or as little detailed as you want, depending on their age. But things to remember about when meeting the police. Obviously, keep your hands to yourself. And just in general, I think that's just a good rule for everybody. I tell it to my son because he has trouble keeping his hands to himself. And then he accidentally hurts his sisters. But it was more of him just kind of being reckless and not paying attention. And so my girls and my other son also kind of get that that instruction as well. So, you know, it's just a general rule: keep your hands to yourself so that nobody else gets hurt. Do not touch badge or body. Maybe just explain why it is that you shouldn't do that, and you know, because you don't want to become a learned behavior over the long course, over the long term. Don't touch any of the equipment that an officer wears or carries. You may explain like the sense of this is somebody's possessions, you know, this is their things, and we shouldn't touch other people's things. An officer's not going to ever give a permission to touch their items. And obviously never touch the officer's guns. I think that's a given. But when you interact or are questioned by the police, this is probably what's kind of on everybody's mind and why you're sort of here tonight. This will really apply for those people who are interacting with the police. I generally want to say that's probably going to be your older children who maybe have had the police called on them for whatever reason. But these are just some things you can talk through with your child. Paying attention, staying focused. I know that's not easy all the time because heart rates get up, people get amped up, and your thought processes slow down. And that's just in general for everybody. And how much more for somebody who already is struggling with a disability. And so, and listening to what the police say, actually taking the time to identify what they're saying, and kind of finding those facts and not just trying to listen to maybe a feeling that they're having. Following directions, staying calm when the police approach or want to talk, and staying where you are. That could be a big one. I remember one time I was talking to a young boy, and he had a mental disability. I believe he was autistic, and he just continually wanted to keep walking away. There's two sides. You could say, well, we can, is that better? Okay, we can run after this kid and pursue him for evading, which is probably not, a smart idea. If you're using your brain as an officer, you need to slow down and to see what's going on with this child. And so we were able to talk to this kid and to get him to calm down. And then finally, I think it was probably 2 hours, he finally opened up. So it was a lot of persistence. Do not ignore, run, fight, argue, or disobey the police. All those things are easily said, but if you start to talk to your kids about these things openly, so that we're kind of getting away from this sense of fear. We're getting this fear of police out of the way, and then giving them confidence that they can actually speak with the police officer. It'll probably make things a little bit easier. These are things I've talked to my son about. And obviously with my son, it's going to be a little easier because he has an officer in the house, and it's just kind of common knowledge and common every day for him. But these are just a few things to consider when interacting or questioned by the police.
Yeah, and with this, as being a social story, it's picture supported, and it has the things on there. You can use and just go over like one thing at a time, or add more on, and this and that. So this gives a bigger picture of all of those different things. But for those of you who have used social stories before, it's a way to break it down so that they're able to visually see and know what to anticipate, if that makes sense. So this is an example of that one. And I know at the end we have lots of different resources online. If we need to email something to us, you can contact me. My email will be on this as well. But just know that on the Center on Disability and Development website, we have all of this stuff posted. Okay, so this is posted there too. All right. This next one, I never really thought about ID cards, or how do you identify that you have a disability, all right? And so doing that, I know with my son, that was the biggest fear. And we found an ID card online that we were able to print out. It has the information on it. And so that's what we've got resources here for you now, if that's something that is appropriate for your family member, all right? And so basically, this is a place where you can get a wallet card, and I'll show you, we have another page that'll show some different things on it, but you're able to put on there what the disability is, what kind of needs that they have, like, I will be very quiet because I'm confused, or please have patience for while I calm down, or whatever. And so you put person specific on there. I know on my son's, it had my name on it, that if they needed to contact and go, okay, something's going on, it had that name on there, and he carried it in his wallet, okay? And so it's a good thing to have. But the coolest thing that is new, it's called Texas Driving with a Disability, but it actually, and there's a website, you can even Google that or whatever. I mean, the website is linked on there. But the thing about it is that you can get an ID card, a Texas ID card with this information on it, or if they actually earn a driver's license, this information can be on it as well. And what it is it marks that there's a communication disability. But if you'll look at the list for Group 1, that includes autism, mild intellectual disability, Down syndrome, Parkinson's, speech and language disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, brain injury, and cerebral palsy. All right, there is actually a doctor's form you get filled out, which you can access online, and they fill it out. And when you get their ID, there will be a thing on there, a C, that's going to give the information saying that they have a communication disability. And that's going to be on their ID or on their driver's license. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So, my daughter's really young. She's only 3, but she only communicates through sign. And I've only met like 2 people who can do sign language like fluently. And what does she? What in that type of situation? What does she do with the officer?
Okay.
So we actually have.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so the question was, her daughter primarily will speak through sign language. And the question was, how does that work when you're dealing with an officer? And so we do have a local sign language interpreter. And so what I've done in the past is call our dispatch and have them dispatch that person out to help on the traffic stop, or just even on any scene. And so they'll come out and they're like officially licensed interpreter, sign language interpreters.
Will they understand that she's trying to communicate through sign?
Is she sign language? Is it
Yeah,
like?
she won't talk, but she'll like start signing, and then
Most likely they'll start to pick up on different, like they have that skill set. Is it American Sign Language? Is that what is she being taught that?
yeah, well, that's what she understands.
That's what she understands? Yeah, and they would pick up on that with their skill set for sure.
The other thing, I didn't add on Part 2, Group 2, and that is for deaf, hard of hearing, different things, which includes, that's a whole nother thing with the communication, that as she gets older can be on there. And so, because that's the first Group 1, I put that on there, but Group 2 has that as well. And again, so that can be on her ID when she gets older, that she can show, and then the officers would know.
That is one of the primary courses that we take as we get our certificates of interacting with deaf and hard of hearing, especially in the realm of traffic stops. And so we kind of had that background training there.
And even if that's not the disability and she signs, it can still be part on there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just like we're black, so it can be a little iffy when it comes to interacting with an officer. And I don't want her to be scared and then not do it because there's just no and she does it and then it's just a big blowout.
Yeah. Well, that's what, and we're gonna talk about some things that she can do if she's having to interact with them. So we'll get to that too, some things that you can show with that as well. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Officer Yoder, would you mind explaining, so when you, because since my son is now driving, and he actually does have the communication impediment in his driver's license, when an officer sees that, what training, like what are y'all expected to do once you see that?
Sure. So Texas actually requires like a whole week, 40-hour week of training. It's called crisis intervention training, but a lot of that envelops a lot of these things mentioned under Group 1. And so learning to identify those things and learning how to react to those things, and we've run through scenarios so many times. And so the officers should already have an understanding of what to be looking for, whether it's a traffic stop or a 911 call, if they slow down and pay attention. It does take a little bit, you got to use your brain and think about it as an officer to slow down and to realize exactly what are you dealing with. And so on top of that training, we do in-service training every year. Most agencies don't do that, but we do a little bit extra just so that we can stay on top of this. And so that's kind of the primary training that we have been given. And then also just from my own experience, being a father to a son with autism, it's kind of helped bolster that a little bit. So,
Thank you.
well,
If the child is not going to become a driver, are they able to get the same on the ID?
Yes, ma'am.
That,
Yeah, it can be on the ID as well. Yes. And so that's all new. I mean, this is all things that have just been getting in place. I mean, I remember when I met the mom who did the driver's ed to got it in the very beginning. And I was like, man, I wish I'd have thought of that when I was going through or teaching driver's ed or doing the different things. And so once she got that, then it has expanded besides just with the autism.
I can't say that I've ever actually seen one on the license or ID, but I have seen what you'll see on the next page at least a couple times.
Yeah. So this is a card, and again, you can download this off the internet and print it out. And it has on there, I have a developmental disability, and then you fill it out. You've got all of that stuff on there. And so it gives an example of it. It's through one of the ARCs. And again, that link is there. And so even if it's not on the ID or you get used to any of that, you can get it yourself and get the information on there. Okay? So it is available without even and before, and if they haven't gotten a Texas ID or any of that, you can have that kind of card with them. Right? Yes, ma'am.
I've seen online how people put like stickers on their cars, and also for the driver they have this like.
It's a thing that goes on the seat belt. Yes.
Yeah, that kind of lets everybody know.
I actually saw that just probably about a couple months ago. I made a traffic stop and there was a sticker on the back that said, "My son or my daughter has autism." So it was very, it was helpful to know. And that opened up a conversation for me and the driver. You can relate, especially if you've already experienced that. So I have seen that a couple times, yeah.
Because I've heard that officers will check like around the vehicle for maybe not specifically for that, but like stickers.
Sometimes, yeah. If it's readily apparent and available on the back of the window, we'll look at it. Obviously, sometimes people will put things on the back of their window just to kind of deceive you, to make, and to make you like, oh, well, I donate to the 100 Club, so please don't pull me over, that type of thing. So
this is like a legitimate, card that you receive.
Well, this
one's self-done.
Yeah, it's self-done. But the most legitimate will be when it's on the ID or the driver's license. That's the most legitimate with that. But again, this is going to provide the information, that they're going to know, and at least we'll have y'all looking to see, okay, if they're given this and it says on there, I have a delay in my speech, give me time to process, then they're going to know that when they're standing there quiet.
That's a good kind of segue to later on. You'll see my email, and what we can do is draw a case number, do an incident report, and feel free to email me your contact info, your child's info. We can just document and put like a little notice next to their name, next to your name, and that way we have something to go off of. We can look at our records and say, okay, John has this diagnosis, or if he's ran away somewhere, this is where he goes to stay safe. It's the place that he likes to go hang out. And as much information as the officer has on scene, it's going to make it a lot easier. So we can do that. You'll see my email later. Just jot it down if that's something you're interested in.
Okay. This is another teaching method that you may or may not have heard of. It's called living out loud. And so I know this was something that worked real well with my son. I mean, across the board, from when I was cooking to doing laundry. Oh, wow, I can't put the lights and the darks together here because, this is going to turn this color or this. And I would just say it as I was going through situations so that he was hearing it and he didn't think I was being that teacher mom. You now don't put those together, all of that kind of stuff. Instead, I lived out loud. And this is one thing that I know we did do, and did circumstances that we would see in the community or different things where you can sit here and be explaining, living out loud when you see it happen. So you can point to things. For example, if it's a traffic stop and you see them over here, then you're saying, wow, look at those lights that are on there. They have to turn the lights on in the car so that, yeah, they can know when to stop. And wow, they did a great job. They pulled over right away and got to the side. Oh, good. They didn't get out of the car either. Look, their hands are up where you can see them. Oh, that's a really good thing. And so you're talking it out loud so that they're understanding what things should take place. Of course, if you see something that shouldn't take place, oh, they just drove off. Oh my gosh, are they going to get in trouble? When they get pulled over, they can get arrested, and they can be this and that. And so you're living out loud. You're sharing that information as it's occurring. And then again, it's like teaching without teaching, with sitting down. Okay, we're going to look at this story and do this.
Does anybody already do this? Yeah. To me, I found that it was really difficult in the beginning to kind of pick this up. You know, you try to be perfectionist, and then you really have to take it on as a lifestyle. And then after a while, you start to just do it naturally. But it's been very impactful for me, at least.
Yeah, it helps all students. I did it teaching no matter when I was in general ed or not, or special ed, I did it because it was like, oh man, I gotta have that place for those papers to be turned in. Let me grab this. Well, what do you think all the rest of my class just did? Oh, we gotta turn in this paper and we gotta get this. So living out loud, I just found it as a really good thing. If you're at a community event and you see the officer, it's a really good place to talk about how to interact. And look, I'm going to walk up to him and say hi, but watch, I'm going to be an arm length away. I'm not going to measure, but I'm going to stay an arm length away because I don't want him to think that I'm, going to grab his gun or do something. Okay, so you're living out loud. You're saying what to do, and they really do pick that up. They really do pick that up. Not the first time, maybe not the 20th time, but at some point, it gets processed, and then they will do it. I know my son used to say stuff out loud as he did it. Doesn't your son do the same thing?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll say it out loud because we use living out loud, but I don't care if it keeps them safe and it's going on with all of that. So, school resource officer, all of those different things, you're talking about what's happening. And so living out loud really, really helps with that. So, okay. This next part is the part that they're going over in the youth room. All right, and what it is, it's a scale, 1 to 5, where 5 is against the law. And you're going, what do we need this for? Okay, well, a lot of times your family member may not be aware of what their behavior is like. Okay, so like if I'm sitting here and I'm going, hi, Officer Yoder, really nice to meet you. Okay, that's a 1. All right, so we practice, and I'll go, ooh, good job, 1. All right, and then it goes all the way down to where if I get in here and I'm getting real close to him, that's a 4. Wait a minute here, and 5 is if I punch him, but I'm not going to punch you. Okay. So, but the whole thing of having the numbers, I could redirect my son in public without humiliating him, making him stop and think of what was happening. So like if I saw a behavior and I thought, oh, he's getting a little creepy here, I'd go 4. And that meant you better stop what you're doing right now. Even if he didn't understand what he was doing, he knew he needed to stop it there. As opposed to me coming up and going, you're standing too close to him, don't do that. And so we used the number scale. So it was a way you could do it and redirect in public that wasn't humiliating. I don't know how else to put it. So, we did this. And like I said, the youth is going over that. And they're seeing pictures of stuff, and they're going to rank it and see, is this a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
When we talked about this kind of in preparation, where I had mentioned my son has been taught, when he gets to a certain point, I give a certain keyword or cue word, and it's like, you know, Mr. Flexible, like you need to be flexible, or don't be, you know, I'll say like rock. Rock means like you're being rock-brained right now, and you're not, you know, you're not being open to the suggestions. So almost similar to this, but if you find a cue word that also helps, it'll help them just kind of redirect.
Well, what you said with the cue word.
Yeah.
Okay, safety. Here's something I was going to say for the safety box, but I know with my son, for making sure he understood if somebody was safe or not, we had a safe word. And if he didn't feel comfortable with someone that was picking him up or asking him questions, whatever it was, he would say, what is the word? And if they couldn't say it, then he backed off and sought out. Did I say that right? Looked for a safe person and went to. So, I mean, this was even when we were first teaching him to answer the phone, because he didn't get it. I mean, he would take everything literally. There was all these different things. So, want to guess what his special word was? It was his favorite food. Fettuccine Alfredo. And so when he'd answer the phone or this or that, and it was like he's somebody else, and he'd say, what's the word? And they'd say Fettuccine Alfredo. He knew it was okay. So only certain people had that word and everything. But I found that as a really good way to, have a safety net with that.
The safe words also kind of remind me of boundaries, allowing your child to know that there are boundaries. For instance, my son doesn't like tight hugs, and that may be offensive to somebody in the family, but at this point we don't even care anymore, because some people just don't understand. And so allowing them to understand that, hey, you're allowed to say, no, I don't want to hug right now. And if somebody gets mad about that, that's okay. We know that you have set your boundaries and you're sticking to them, and that's good for you. And so I encourage you to encourage your children to set boundaries.
Yeah. And the youth room, they have a handprint thing, and they'll be, when they leave, they're going to have written on there who their safe people are. So they will have that as a reminder, because that was one of the things that we taught him, because he visualizes so much with my son that he could look through and just kind of visualize who it was on the hand. So, okay. How many of y'all do role playing, have done role playing with your family member? A couple of you. Has anybody ever done scripting or know what scripting is? Anybody want to share what they think scripting is? Scripting is coming up with a script of what to say. Okay, I mean, that's what we did role playing, but my son responded better to the scripting, because he couldn't in his head process to get something out. He didn't know what to say, and if it was something that he didn't know or this or that, then it was like, or if you're lost or there's this or that, he had a script. He knew what he wanted to say, and we practiced that all the time. Okay, his funny story he tells about it is that when he went to college, we scripted. What do you do with the police officers there? If you're needing help, this is what you need to say, all of these different things. Well, he had a suite mate. He had a room to himself. There was no way we were sharing. And he had a suite mate. So we had to go. You're going to be sharing a bathroom with this person. This is what all, this and that. You might hear him getting sick. Because I'm thinking, okay, he's in college. There's sometimes people over imbibe or different things and get sick. He's not going to know what to do. And so we scripted all of that out. He was so excited. He never initiated phone calls to me, but he initiated one that he called me. Mom, I got to use the script. He was throwing up in the bathroom. So I knocked and said, are you okay? Do you need help? And he said, the kid goes, no, I'm okay, I need some space. He said, okay, if you need help, knock on the door again. He goes, Mom, it worked. He was so excited because it took that pressure off. We practiced when he was doing his driving, about a pullover. Yeah. What to say, what to do. I mean, it is scripted in his head. And so that's those kind of situations where you practice it and you let them know, you know, what they need to say, what they need to do. Now, his funny part on the end of the story, I didn't teach him how to, because the sweet mate went fishing and was gutting the fish, which made it stink in the bathroom. I didn't prepare him for that. So he had no idea what to say to go, get that stuff out of here, it smells so bad. So he called me on that one, but it was too late. It stunk. So.
That scripting, when you script, you've already done it. You've already done it in your mind, so you know what to expect. And officers do this too. When they go to calls, they're kind of game planning. What am I going to do if I get there and this happens? So scripting is very beneficial.
Yeah, and so what this is there's some lists on here of things that you can practice, all right? If they have to call 911. Has anybody in here ever gone over that with their family member on what to say if they have to call 911? Yeah, it's, you know, again, in my classroom, we would practice it and do that, but, you know, they needed to have, I know, you know, they get the address and all of this, but, you know, well, we'll talk about that at the end. You can have a piece of paper that gives them ideas of what to do and what to cover for all of that. If they're lost, who do they need to seek out? If someone's hurt, there's a car accident, what if they've witnessed a crime? Something has happened and they're being questioned, you know? So those are things to think about with that. Role playing, really have them practice how to disclose their disability. And we're going to give some more ideas on the next slide. But if they just go running up and go, oh, I'm autistic, okay, that's probably not going to be the best way to disclose, because if I'm coming up to him with my hands up, what's he going to think?
Threat.
Like a threat. Okay? So instead, we practiced hands out in front. Actually, what we also practiced was starfish breathing. Have y'all ever heard that? You do the starfish, in and out, inhale, exhale. And so you can do that, and it kind of calms you. And you can be doing that, and it's not seen as, so it's a little calming thing, and it makes their hands have to do something. So that was something I know that we also did. There are ID cards, like I had one student in all the years that had a medical bracelet that said that he was autistic. Most of my students with disabilities didn't like wearing something. There's a sensory issue with that. But I did have one that did that, and they did have a medical bracelet, which they were able to show if something was happening so that a person could look and see. Practicing with the hands up, keeping the hands out where you can see. When they role play, facing the officer, practice remaining still. Okay, how many of y'all have someone who would have trouble with that? Yeah, and so that's the whole thing, is it takes practice. I don't know what else to say. And so we always played a game. You know, I, again, had, you know, living out loud, and then I'd say something, and I'd say, okay, freeze. He got rewarded for it if he did it. I mean, I put a lot of, you know, way to go, you know, good job, you got an extra 10 minutes on the computer, or this or that, or you got to talk to me about your subject for 10 minutes and I'll actually listen and interact with you, because sometimes his subjects were weird. And so anyway, but we practiced all of those different things, and not just in that circumstance, so that it became routine. Okay? And I know it's just weird. You're thinking, what am I having to do all of this with my kids? But if this is how they're going to learn, and this is what's going to keep them from being harmed or doing something that's going to put their life or someone else's in jeopardy, it's worth the time. Really worth the time.
I'd also say phase it in over little by little, because it does seem like a lot, and I've realized that anytime I tried to like press that issue, it didn't go very well. And so even when I'm at home out of uniform, I'll say, okay, I'm the officer, this happens, what are you going to do? Or what can you do? Or what do you know? And so just to pick their brain and to get them to start thinking and thinking out loud, it's been helpful in my own life, and I know I've seen other people implement it as well.
All right, these are the specifics on here. Items to practice if a police officer stops them, okay? These are the things that are gonna keep them safe. This is the specifics. And so this can be something that you can go over, like it depends on, again, age, developmental level, all of these different things. These can be done by scripting, role-playing, or you can really sit them down and say, okay, we need to practice this. Because guess what? I mean, I was a driver's ed teacher. Have I ever gotten a ticket? Yeah. Okay, and so did I know better? Yeah. So, you know, all of that. And so just because you think or this or that, it's to practice. These are the set things that need to do that are going to keep them safe.
You can even turn this into a game. You know, show me your hands. Don't show me your hands. You know, have the flexibility to make it what you can. You know, stay in place. We did that green light, red light with my kids, and then they started to learn like these different. You know, we'll do the movement like, all right, go, freeze, and just kind of you're teaching them, but in a roundabout way. And then the don't stand so close. You can make a game out of that too. Just kind of thinking outside of the box in different ways that you can implement these things.
And the biggest thing is that it's if they have the ability to understand why they're doing these things, needing to do them, make sure that they understand and go over it. Because showing your hands, I mean, as soon as they do something else, it can get them in harm's way because, you know, you can't tell what I have behind me. You can't tell what I have in my pockets. You can't tell any of that. So if they've been involved with something and they get stopped or they're being asked, here's a person who's going to try their best with their job. They don't know your child. And if all of a sudden, you know, they're here and they're digging in their pockets, what's going to be your reaction?
Yeah, I'm going to start looking and saying, hey, why are you doing that? Put your hands back up on the wheel. What do you have in your pockets? What are you reaching for? You know, starts to, that natural progression of questions starts to come to your mind.
Which could elevate escalate the stop even more. And so that's why it's practicing ahead of time, you know, make it so it's real clear, show your hands. If they need to get out that ID card, they need to be able to say that. ID card, you know, need to get the ID card. And so that way they're able to ask with all of that. And so these are crucial to practice. I don't know what else to say. You're just crucial to practice. Yeah, running away. Don't run away. How many of your kids would run away? Okay, mine would have run. Okay, and so that was something we really, really had to work on. You know, if it's the police officer, you have to stay there. Okay, he would do his run in place. You know, that's how he would move. I'm like, you know, it's like, what are you going to do? But you got to stay there. You can't just take off. Okay, can't take off. All right.
Yeah, if a police officer stops them, we talked about that a little bit, trying to get them to disclose their diagnosis. That may not be easy. It may be difficult at first, but getting them to be open about and comfortable, you know, with their diagnosis and saying, this is what I have and it's okay. You know, it's okay to disclose it when it's appropriate. And it's also okay to say that you don't understand. I've told my son plenty of times, look, if you don't know, just tell me you don't know. That way we're on the same page and I can help you.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing. I mean, they've got to be able to say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I mean, if that's where they're at, then that's what they need to say. All right? And so, you know, it's and again, with the diagnosis, you know, there's so many different things. And I mean, I've had lots of parents who are like, oh, well, I don't want them to disclose or this or that. And it's like, well, there's times that people need to know that. Otherwise, they don't know how to interact, or they'll make judgments based upon just what they're seeing. It's especially hard with an invisible disability, with a hearing thing, or I keep saying autism, but there's a whole lot of others. There's people with intellectual disabilities. You're not going to look at them and go, unless they have Down syndrome. Down syndrome, you're going to see and go, oh, they have Down syndrome because they have the facial expressions. There's people who have cerebral palsy that have different movement issues, but you're not going to see it when you first meet them. So there's different things that go with all of that. And so when it's an invisible one, that's why it's they need to be able to say, you know, what's going on with them and be able to explain it, what they need help with, or you know, please give me time to talk. Please give me time to talk. And so those type of things. And that's going to be individual, because some of yours may be very hyperverbal and just say all kinds of stuff. Okay, then it's like you're working on only say 2 sentences. You know, you're working on the opposite side. So again, that's all individual, but they need to be able to do that and share and know that it's safe to do it to a police officer. Okay? That doesn't mean they have to run up to anybody on the street and go, hey, I'm autistic. You know, you don't have to do that. You set who they need to disclose it to. But if it's a police officer that's interacting with them, you need to work on them and with the disclosure. Okay? And if they're not verbal, again, the card, lots of different, you know, ways to try to share that. So, all right, this one is for all of y'all in here. You're a caregiver. Something happens with your son or daughter. All right, what's your immediate reaction? You gonna jump in? Wait, do this? No. Well, guess what? Sometimes that's not the best. Wait and see. Allow, because if the police officer is stopping and they're trying to get information from your son or daughter, you can say, hey, I'm their caregiver, I'm their mom, you know, they're autistic, but they may say, let me ask them first, okay? They may need, because it just depends on the circumstances, all right? I mean, they have to protect themselves too. What if it was somebody that wasn't their mom that was saying it was their mom? Okay, they need to be able to communicate all of that. And so, but if you are with them, allow them to be addressed, and then make sure that the officer knows that you're there to help. Okay, because if you look at the last one, how many of you, if they were doing something that was illegal or this or that you might want to try to cover up for them? You know? Oh no, they didn't mean it. No, you know, we'll do this. The reality is it needs to be the truth.
I would say we're pretty good, and as a whole, sharing that information. Like as soon as we get that info, we're on the radio saying like, hey, let so-and-so know that this person has this diagnosis and caregivers here and can help de-escalate this situation. I think over the years, I've seen it kind of, we're starting to learn these things, and a lot of it is just learning that there are so many different diagnoses and understanding what it can look like and what it can exhibit itself as. And so we pass that information along as quick as possible to help get the control of the scene. So try to alleviate some of the fear a little bit.
Yeah, and it's okay to share if there's a trigger or something. You know, don't touch him. He will hit you back.
Yeah, we've used that before.
Yeah.
There's people that we know, like you don't do certain things, or you'll just trigger them to go, and it won't de-escalate, and then he'll be in cuffs, and for his safety and our safety, and that's just some of the things we look out for.
Yeah, so it's okay sharing all of that and doing that, but just know that if they're interacting with your son or daughter, they're going to be doing that too. Yes, you can be there, you can support, you can do all of those different things, but no, they may need to specifically find out something from them or get specific information. So when that's happening, you're there to help by the side. Don't touch, he'll hit you, touch him, or whatever. And so you're giving all of that. But just recognize that you just can't come in, grab them, and go, okay, you can't,
Yeah, and I would say too, if you come up to an officer on the scene and you say in a very calm tone, you're probably more likely to be heard by the officer. The officer's not gonna be like, they're gonna say it calmly, hey, that's so-and-so, that is my son or daughter, this is what she's or he is experiencing right now. Then the officer's gonna be like, oh, okay. Like, they're not here to bother us or harm us, they're being legitimate with us. And so, then I've seen it too where the parents or the caregiver will just take them straight up to and be like, hey, can you come help us? Come along with us and help us if it's safe.
So just again, know that it can go either way, you know, but running up and screaming and grabbing him to protect him, which is what most of us would want to do, may not be the best action. Okay?
We talked a little bit on community engagement. I guess I jumped the gun, but like I said, we do community engagement, especially our team, neighborhood enforcement. And so we'll go and do presentations. We try to stay active in the community. It's kind of slow over the winter months, but as the spring picks up, we're very active. We're out there doing community helper, First Friday. The schools invite us out. Net even supplements the school resource sometimes, so we get to interact with them in the schools. And so there's plenty of opportunities for you to get your children around law enforcement and to get them comfortable.
Yeah, and then again, these are the set rules, you know, live out loud and say them, or, you know, use it as that time period. You don't touch a police officer. You don't, okay? Even if you're trying to get their attention, unless something horrendous is happening, don't come up and touch them. How many of y'all have family members that are huggers? Okay, my son's not a hugger, but some of y'all have some huggers. Oh yeah, well, we gotta learn that the same way, you know, they need to ask before they hug. They need to ask, very important, need to ask. And it actually works both ways. I mean, I know a lot of my students, if I wanted to give them oh yeah, I mean, I would have I'd love to give you a hug, but I'd ask, are you okay with a high five or a side hug? And then they would choose. So that's just something we built into everything, but yeah, no hugging. And again, you brought it up before, do not touch the dogs, okay? They're working. But you know what, that's a whole thing. If you see the dogs in public, you can point out living out loud, the service dogs or therapy dogs, because they're gonna have the things on them. And then that's when you're saying, you know, you see a dog with that, don't touch them, you know, and that's a living out loud thing.
And also, if you ever just want to have not a community-oriented interaction with law enforcement, you can just come to the police department and say, hey, this is my son or my daughter. They like to just interact with the police for a few minutes. Is that okay? And then we can come out. Just come to the lobby and we can interact with your child.
Yeah, and it's okay because you know what? We get confused on all the uniforms because you've got security people, there's all these different things. It's okay to ask, are you a police officer or this or that? And then that's a learning experience because you don't want them just to see, I mean, you know, you're pointing out with the social story and everything, here's the badge, here's this and that, but how many other people have uniforms? You know, and so you want them to kind of be aware of that, and then it's an okay to ask and what it is that they're doing. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question actually, Officer Yoder, on that.
Yes.
So, if you go to the station, for example, and then say, hey, would it be okay if an officer could come out and explain, and maybe just, so my son can hear from officer himself, what does assault by threat mean? Or could you give really specific situations, and is that?
Yeah, no, that's not a problem.
Or what could we do in jail? Things like this. There are certain behaviors, for example, let's say there's certain behaviors, someone exhibits that, I may not call the cops on you, but a girlfriend might, or someone at school might, and then that will be an arrest.
Sure.
So the five thing, yeah. But I also wonder too, I didn't know about that until now.
Yeah.
But I wonder if I can imagine my son's logic, right? Because he thinks I don't know anything, of course, because he's also 15.
Yeah.
But if he saw someone in a uniform at the police station say, no, your mom is not crazy, because he'll argue that with me on an almost weekly basis. when I say, what you're doing right now is this, it's like, no, it's not, or like, you can't get arrested for that, and this and that. I'm like, did you Google it? And
I would err on the side of not bringing him simply to prove a point, but to try to get them to understand in a roundabout way, like developing more of a relationship with an officer, and then that way there's more trust. Versus if we just say, well, you did this and it's wrong, and now I'm going to take you to the police station and they're going to tell you why it's wrong. It might not go over as well. But if you just brought him in and said, hey, I really want you to meet a police officer, and just give me 10 minutes and bear with me, and then go from there. And like I already know, I'm kind of understanding the backstory a little bit, so that might be beneficial. It's like, okay, I kind of understand where he's coming from, and just a simple interaction. Because I hate for get off on the wrong foot and be like, yeah, your mom said you're wrong, and also I'm going to tell you you're wrong. So it just doesn't go over well. But
I see it as proving something to pinpoint.
yeah, I think there's a way to do it nicely and tactfully.
I also realize that actually is playing into his argument trail too a little bit of like
Mhm.
why he's trying to convince me I'm wrong. And then I go in like, oh my gosh, you will get arrested. And then it's like fear mode.
Yeah.
Someone needs to tell you.
Yeah.
I see it. Thank you.
He's 15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've done is I don't want to say I ignore my son when he starts doing that, but it's like I don't I try not to. I'm not perfect, but I try not to feed back into it, because then I just notice like he takes what I've said and uses it as ammo against me. It's kind of this revolving door, and so trying to find a good stopping point in that conversation, or maybe just even change the topic if you can. Redirect.
Take on it.
Yeah. Just my 2 cents.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
And that's where, unfortunately, the one student of mine that got arrested, he's not my only student that's been arrested before. And one of mine, again, that test of evidence, I had one that he, no, that's not it. Okay, so give me 3 things of proof that shows that it is. Okay, and so that was a way that worked with them. So it's different. All right. The safety plan. I know we always had a safety notebook at home where it has like what to do for 911 call. Information from this presentation, that's a whole other thing that can go in there. Who's the helpers, who to contact them. Identify safe places. If there's they need to be someplace safe, we need to get that. And then again, what you had said about getting all the information
Yeah,
and
actually,
everything.
this is the perfect example of the kind of information that we could use, just to give officers that knowledge so they know what they're getting into as they go to a call.
Yeah, and so I know we kept a list actually on the refrigerator that had the medicines, behaviors, calming, it was a set list. We made it and it was there. So that if there was something that was happening or there was an emergency with, let's say I got hurt or whatever and an ambulance is coming, then that would be there too, that can be given as don't worry about them, here's their information, because, my son would be screaming and yelling and all of that kind of good stuff. So, oh yeah.
And it might be good to have this sort of information copied multiple times, so that if something happens, you can just kind of like say, hey, officer, here's this. And then we're like, okay, we got all this information. If you decide not to put it in the records, then you just give us the piece of paper. And then we'll say, okay, we've got all the information we need.
Yeah. So, and I know, like I said, with mine, I was in the hospital overnight once. I had a surgery thing, but I was overnight. My son was suspended from school, tore apart everything, because he didn't understand, okay? And so I learned from that one that I really should have let his teachers be aware that I would not be there overnight. I mean, his dad was still there, but it didn't matter. Okay, this has changed. Mom's not here. What's happening? She's in the hospital. That means she's dying. That means she's dying. What's happening? And I mean, it just kept going in his head. And yeah, he lost it. And so I learned from that. That was my thing of like letting people know and putting some stuff in place with that. So it makes a big difference. Really makes a big difference. So, and that 911 call, you can Google that, and they have like forms you can fill out. That, I mean, they're going to get the address and stuff, but you know, you're going to have to say your name. Can they spell their name? Well, maybe or maybe not. You know, and so it just there's all that different information that can be given. So, okay, and this is what's really important. Always remember, police are moms and dads and regular people too. They live life outside of their jobs. They have different interests. They have all of that. Teach them that they're not just the enemy, you know, that it's not with this and everything. If you have that relationship with them or they see them as real people, it can make a big difference with that.
Even though we have like a straight face all the time, most of the time we're just thinking about, I don't know, nothing probably. But we're just getting used to carrying ourselves, you know, in a certain way, so it kind of becomes part of who you are. But really, you know, my wife says I need to smile more, but, you know, I just kind of got this resting face that goes on. So don't be afraid if you see us in public and we're kind of got this straight face. Don't be afraid to come up and say hello and chat, because immediately I promise you, if anybody at PD would open up and start talking to you or your children. So
yeah. So just know that we're all, and you know, I can't imagine your job. I mean, there's so many jobs I can't imagine. You know, that you come up to a situation and you're having to make determinations like this, okay, very quick. And so that's why, again, why it's so important that we prepare our kids, our young adults, our adults, that we prepare them so that those kind of decisions won't be, okay, I'm making a decision real quick and I'm reacting because they had their hands coming towards me, you know? And so if we do all of that, again, it's the safety of both, because I don't know how many of y'all work in a job where, I'm sorry to say that, but could be harmed by someone as part of your job, okay? As part of your job, you could be attacked, you could be shot, you could be different things, and not everybody has to face that. And so it's a definite two-way street with that. Of course, sorry, I'm going to throw in there, teachers have to think about that now too. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot with all of that too. But just remember, you know, and the more we do to prepare, the better it's going to be for both sides. Both sides. So all we had next was, and I didn't put, oh, this isn't the right one. You're going to have to give your email address.
yes, do y'all have a pen? You can take down my email if you'd like. It's B as in boy, Y-O, D as in David, E-R, at Brian, that's spelled boy, B as in boy, R-Y-A-N, it's TX.gov, BrianTexas.gov.
Yeah, I thought I had added it onto this one, and I put the wrong one in there. Sorry about that. And then mine's on there too, if there's different things. And I know we shared the other one about for the Center on Disability and Development. But yeah, if questions come up or what other resources, because quite honestly, there's also the link here that has all those, like the tips for traffic stop, guide of pictures for interaction, the Texas Driving with Disability, that's that one with ID cards, and the other. So those are all links that you can go and look at and has additional resources. So yeah, those are, we'll have them on the web page on the center. But if you're something that you don't know and you were like, what were all that, just email me and I'll send it to you. Okay. I know we'll do questions, but they are doing the surveys right now. And so if there's any way you can do the surveys, again, we really do read every single one of them. We put the information together. We want to make this so that it reaches as many people and it hits your needs. So please let us know what you've got, what could have changed. There's all kinds of information on there. What was the most important? So if we do this again, then we can do an emphasis or something else we should have covered or different things. So please fill that out. I'm gonna go back to this. But other than that, was there any other questions or?
Yes, ma'am.
How does stating their disability or having their ID card change your interaction with them versus someone else that doesn't have that?
So that kind
Because it doesn't say, if you touch me, I might hit you, or if your lights are too bright or too
Right.
loud, I might run. Like, how does that change your actual interaction with them?
Right. So what that does for the officer, so from my experience, that kind of puts me on the right path. It's I know like that it's going to be a different interaction. So I might not know all the details about the person, but I know like now I'm going to have to approach this than I would with somebody who doesn't have a disability. And so while it might not give all the details as part of our training and through even our experience, we can try to gauge. You know, we're not doctors, but we do know, like, just based off of what we've seen and what we've interacted with, kind of how to guide our way through that interaction. So it's very helpful and beneficial to have that. Yep.
Any other? Yes.
I know, like at nighttime when y'all go to the cars, most of the time y'all flash the light, and she has that sensory.
Okay. Yeah.
Without the light, she can automatically start freaking out.
Mhm.
She does it now, like with the sun. So like, how would y'all approach that? Because even like when an adult gets pulled over and like turn the light off, y'all keep it on. So
Yeah. Yeah. So the primary thing. How old is your child?
she's 3.
3. So when she gets older, that's one of the things you might start doing the talk out loud thing. Like, hey, just say, hey, I have this, and this is why I need you to not shine the light right in my eyes. That living out loud and talking out loud is very beneficial. I can only speak for myself. If I heard that, I'm gonna, take the direct steps. It's basically the same thing as getting the ID card. To me, that's like an indicator. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to adjust how I approach this situation. And so obviously, officers can use the lights at night so they can see inside the car. But if we have that information, we can adjust accordingly. So I would just start them young. Start saying, hey, if this happens, feel comfortable enough to say, this is why. Because my son has a sensory thing too. It's like hugs are too hard. You can't even hug him. It's like he encountered a flight of stairs once and he couldn't make it up the stairs. And so it's like those little things. So just talking out loud and making them comfortable and understanding like their own limitations, I think it just kind of works out for better on both sides. So it's a good question.
Yes, sir.
I'm a parent of my son that has autism. I also am an educator that works directly with students on the spectrum. And one of the things that I've noticed, even with my own son, is that it's hard for them to operate in, like they said, they're very like black and white. They say this maybe happen, this possibly can happen.
Yeah.
Like if they associate, if they see something, they're automatically going to associate that with that. And I know this even while working in the school, that's why I try not to use fear tactics, because if you say, if you do this, you are going to be arrested, or if you do this, you would. If they see someone do that and not be arrested, they're like, oh, you won't get arrested. They
Right.
get arrested.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they don't have the ability to say, well, some people do it, some people don't. Like, so how would you suggest like approaching kids where you can be real with them, but also like if they don't see those things happening? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, how do you talk like, I'm sorry?
Could you paraphrase?
Yeah, so his question is kind of around the realm of, he's an educator who works with autistic children, and a lot of times they see things black and white, and it's like there's no gray area, there's no nuance to anything. So how do you work around that? It's difficult. It's very difficult. It kind of gets back to that, it's the training, but like living out loud and talking out loud and working through scenarios and scripting. It's not going to happen overnight. Like, just to be honest, it's not going to change in one time. But like the repetition, once it starts to set in, even with my son, it's just like, I've seen him grow so much just by doing little things over a long period of time. And so, yeah, that black and white thinking is very difficult to get around. I mean, it took my son probably years just to overcome like some very specific issues. Even then, he still has other ones that come up every now and then. So, do you have anything for that?
Well, no, just like with driving, and with my son, with him driving, it took from the time he got his license, 6 years. 6 years before he could actually drive, because his whole thing was, that person just ran a stop sign. Why did they not get pulled over? That's against the law. They should have a ticket. And he would get so stressed during that time period. And it just took practice, seeing, growth as they mature. They don't grow out of autism, but they learn more and more from the experiences that, yes, not every single time it's going to result in this, but it could result in this. And so that's why you have to be prepared for that. So, yeah, 6 years of him pointing out every mistake people made driving. So
I think also
lots of fun.
pointing out like other options that they have. So like my son is stuck on right now, if he doesn't get to play with his Army guys at the end of the day is ruined. And so like it's explaining that the other option is leave them out tonight and play with them in the morning, and something to give him comfort in knowing that he will one day, the next day, get to play with his Army guys again, and that all is not lost. And so like reassuring has been very helpful for him.
Okay, we need to, it's 7:30, and I know we've got childcare and all of that different stuff. I know I'll be shutting this down, but if you had a question or whatever, feel free. Please make sure you do the surveys. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. And next month is about friends and how to teach them if they're real friends or not real friends and they're being used. Okay? So that's next month. But thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.